Okay, hey y'all. So I am going to walk you through a bit of a Photoshop rendering collage process. But before I do that, I wanted to do a really quick explanation of of why I'm doing this costume, and I just want you to know it's not arbitrary, and I wanted to just give you a chance to look at my what I'm doing for my process book this time. This is for a project I'm working on outside of Northwestern. It's a brand new play called El Condor Mágico, which is about the this U.S. backed operation that took place in South America during the 1970s and 1980s called Operation Condor, where thousands and thousands of innocent people were murdered because they were either communists or they were accused of being communists, etc. Sorry if you can hear the siren in the background. Um, so the play is set in contemporary times, but it obviously deals with some of this historical context because it's a family drama where a younger woman in her 20s is dealing with trying to understand what a woman from Uruguay is trying to understand what her family's role was in this process. So the central character, her name is Nieta, which actually just means granddaughter in Spanish. She's not a named character. None of the characters in the show are named, except for their family roles in Spanish. So her name in the show is Nieta, meaning granddaughter. In the show, she's 25 years old. She's a high school teacher. And so here you'll see some of my emotional research, some of my notes from the script, and also just from reading. And I was looking for South American immigrants, contemporary South American immigrants to America who um, are doing interesting or similar work to the work that's being done in the show. So I came across this woman, Vivian Nunez, who's doing a really, really interesting project called Too Damn Young, actually, which was started in 2014. She's a writer, among other things, but one of her projects is called Too Damn Young, which explores how young people deal with and process grief, especially the loss of parents. And that's something that happens in this show. So I was really captivated by that and also captivated by her and kind of her sense of style. Obviously, I love I don't know, I love the casualness of her as a person. Um, Paired with the just very serious nature of her work. The play, even though it's contemporary, it's set in actually 2011. So one thing I was looking for, she's a high school teacher, and I was looking for like, well, what did high school teachers wear in 2011? And I went to Teach for America for a lot of these original images because I was thinking of what do young high school teachers, where do they end up? Public schools, places where they're stressed, and so that's I leaned on Teach for America to try to find examples. And what I really liked was actually this kind of layered jacket look. In the play, she goes from important meetings with professors and mentors of hers to like meetings with her mother. I just love the idea that this could be layered. And Yeah, again, some of my emotional research here, just like I've asked you all to gather, I want you to know, interesting note that presenting this emotional research for the director and the playwright was actually very helpful. This image in particular here, the reason I chose it is because in the play they talk a lot about, there's a lot of reference to music, musical qualities and waltzing. And truly there's a sense that a lot of the women in these stories were like led or they were like, yeah, led by men in their lives into situations that they by themselves maybe wouldn't have chosen. So there's this kind of sense of dancing with danger or dancing with um yeah, anyway, and this image was very strong for me and it actually resonated a lot with the director, which was really exciting. So I'm not going to go through all the rest of this, but I just want you to see my current process book, like how I'm trying to do this. It's a mix of analog and digital. So I'm doing some writing actually in real life, and then I scan it and I put images together in Photoshop because I think that it's just been a really helpful process for me. And then I put this page together because I was just trying to identify like what was happening in fashion in 2010, 2011. The thing that's tricky about all of this stuff is that like you have to remember that these kind of fashion magazines or like fashion summaries were like a lot on celebrities and celebrity style, and so this isn't going to be what everyday people are wearing or looking like exactly, but I think you can take something from the trends, which you'll see maybe in the finished costume. So great, with that being done, I want to show you what we're going to be working on today. So this is a really simple Photoshop collage. So my style of Photoshop collage, I still like to work in proportion. I like things to remain in proportion to a human body. That's just my style as an artist. I definitely encourage you, if you like to play with like larger shoes or bigger heads or that kind of thing, to go for it. I'm just going to be showing you my style. So don't feel like it has to be my thing exactly. Um, so for Nieta, this character, she ended up in this sweet kind of pleated skirt. And I love this casual striped blouse. And then on top, sometimes also these black loafers, which loafers were super popular around that time period. And then on top, sometimes she might wear this gray tweed jacket. Maybe when she's meeting with her mentor, or she's out doing meetings or something like that. So I'm going to talk you through how I made this, and hopefully that will be helpful for you as you move forward. Okay, so I've already got all of my images here in a separate Photoshop file. So I have the document is 8.5 by 11, just like a regular sheet of printer paper. So 8.5 inches wide by 11 inches tall. Here on the right, you can see I've dragged all of my research images. So what I did was just like as if I was doing a drawing from scratch, I found, I'm going to start from the bottom. I found a figure. So again, you don't always have to do this. A lot of collage artists actually won't do this, but I like to start with a figure, start on top of a figure. And that's because I like things to be in proportion to a human body, right? To a normal human body. And so because of that, if I didn't have a human body to reference, it would be difficult to tell like, well, how big should the jacket be and how big should the shoes be and that kind of thing. So I like to find a figure that I can use as a reference. So I started with a figure. I also know that I want to reference that woman that I found, that Ecuadorian writer, Vivian Nunez. I found this blouse. It's actually a men's shirt, but I think it could be really great if it was tailored and nipped in a little bit. I love this jacket. I think it has a great texture. It looks casual enough that I believe a high school teacher might have it on. It also looks kind of cool to me, if that makes sense. And then I love this. I just think this is a cute skirt, and it feels like the kind of thing that you would throw on to do a lot of things. Like you could teach in this, you could also go get coffee in this, you could also go visit your mom. I don't know. It just feels appropriate for a lot of things. And there's a lot of movement in this play. You have to go from place to place, time to time. And I feel like this could carry us through a lot of places. And then these shoes, I love these loafers here. I think they're just really cool. And I like the black quality. There were a lot of brown ones, but something about this feels like a little more chic. So those are all of my images. So just like I've talked to you about before, I have a folder here on the right. You'll see that I've labeled originals, and that's where I've dragged all of my original images because I don't want to lose those. I want to have them in case I need them. So I'm keeping all of my originals there, and then I've made copies of them, which you see here on the right. And this top one, I've actually renamed all of these so that I know exactly what they are. And I'm going to rename this top one so that we can see that together. So I'm going to rename this top one shoes. You can call them whatever you want. So just like as if I was drawing, that's the same process I'm going to utilize. So I'm going to start by isolating this figure. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. And I am going to use the the object selection tool to do this quickly, hopefully, and easily. So I am going to make sure that I'm on object selection tool. I'm going to check up here and make sure on the top menu and make sure that I'm on new selection. There we go. And I'm going to make sure that I am in my layer because I want to select the body, right? And I'm just going to get close to the, oh God, this is because of my mouse pad, apologies. I'm having issues with my um, mouse. So I'm going to get close to the figure, but getting rid of as much of the background as possible. And you can see it did a pretty good job already. I'm going to zoom in so you can see of getting rid of anything outside that I want. So that actually feels great to me because I'm going to get rid of probably this little stuff anyway, like any little extra stuff I'm going to get rid of when I put the shoes on top of it. So that looks great. So what I want to do is I want to save the body, right? But I want to get rid of everything on the outside. So while this is selected, I'm going to go, I think, while I'm still in this object selection tool, I can right click and there's an option to select inverse. And what that is going to do is it's going to select everything except the body. And then I'm just going to hit delete and boom, there is my figure. So now how to size my figure, right? So what I just did was turn on a grid. There's always a grid option in Photoshop. You can bring it up using a shortcut. If you hit, I'm on a Mac, and if you hit Command and apostrophe at the same time, that brings up this grid. I think there's a way to do it up here also. Yes, I'm seeing View, and then if you go to blah, 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 blah. Come on, you know. Show, okay, view, show, grid, and it will do the same thing. So just like as if we were doing our renderings from scratch, we want to resize this figure so that we have about an inch of space at the top and like an inch and a quarter or so at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is move until I see these two arrows up here. I'm going to hold down the shift key to make sure that I am dragging this. So also, I should say that I am using a lot of keyboard shortcuts that are working for my Adobe Photoshop, which is 2021. I think they will work on the Adobe Photoshop that is installed at school, but apologies if I'm using a shortcut that does not work at school. So I'm holding the shift down to make sure that this is in proportion, right? If I didn't hold the shift down and I was dragging it, it would drag out of proportion, and I don't want that. So I'm going to hold the shift down and drag this in proportion until I get to the size that I want, and then I want to center this in the window on my page. So if this is 8.5 inches wide, I want the center line to be about 4.25. Yeah. So is that right? Yeah, 1, 2, 3. I'm counting out loud, y'all. Sorry. 4.25. So we're about this is like an inch. I feel like this looks pretty good. This is like an inch and a quarter from the top and an inch and a quarter-ish from the bottom. We'll say that's good. So then I can turn my grid off and now you have the figure there. So let's move on. Just like if I was drawing, I start from the body and I work my way out. So the next thing I would want to work on is this shirt, right? Because in my finished rendering, the way I imagine it is I imagine that this shirt gets tucked into this skirt. So let's bring up this shirt. Also, I'm going to save this file because we should be saving this pretty regularly. And I'm going to try to do the same thing. I'm going to click on my object selection tool. I'm going to make sure I'm in a new selection. I'm here with the striped blouse selected, and I'm going to just select around this shirt. And let's see how we did. It did pretty well. There are some areas down here that it didn't catch. I'm not concerned about these because remember it's going to get tucked in, so I'm not going to be concerned about that. But I do want to add these little sections. You can see maybe that here on the sleeves we've lost some, here on the sleeves, and also a little bit of the collar and shoulder here. So what can I do? I can go here and I can use the lasso tool. That's probably the fastest and easiest way to do this, to add to this selection. So I'm gonna go to the lasso tool. I'm gonna make sure that up here, add to selection is clicked. And then you can zoom in, but you don't have to be super exact. And then you just want to trace around whatever has been missed and just make sure you close this loop or get close to closing the loop, and you can release your mouse, and that will select the rest of the image. So I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to trace around this, close my loop, and that's that. Let's see, I think we have a little bit here. I'm not going to worry about that because we're tucking it in. So here's the other thing now. We want to get rid of this inside, right? Because we want to be able to see, well, I'll just show you what happens. So while I'm here, so I've got this object selected, I'm going to right click, just like last time. We're going to select inverse, and then we're going to delete. Okay, cool. So now I want to shrink this down so that I can see it on top of my figure. So I'm going to go here to, I'm going to use my move tool. I need to deselect this area. So I'm using Command D to deselect, but if you go up here, you can, to select, you can deselect. So before you can move things, you have to deselect the area. So I've deselected the area. So now I want to shrink this down. So I'm going to hold shift, find these two little arrows here, and then I'm going to shrink this down until I feel like it's about the right size-ish. And now you can see the problem I was referring to just a few seconds ago, that even once we get this to be the right size, you'll see that this hanger is still here and the back of this shirt is still here. So we need to get rid of that before we can see her neck and everything inside of this blouse. So I think you could spend a lot of time being pretty, you know, being pretty careful about this, but I think the easiest way is, again, with this lasso tool, I'm just going to go and follow along the inside edge of this. And I'm just using a mouse. See, I made a little mistake there. That's okay. We can always go back and fix that. I'm just using a mouse here, y'all, just like you probably have. I'm not using a tablet or any kind of fancy digital pen or anything like that. So I'm just going to I'm selecting everything that I want to get rid of right now. So I made that little mistake down here. So I've just zoomed in, sorry. I'm going to go and add that little bit to my selection. So once I have that area that I want to delete selected, I'm just going to hit delete, and boom, there is my shirt without a back. So I'm going to hit Command D or select, deselect, and now I know that this shirt is the right size. So let's go ahead and now get this situated a little bit better on our figure. So here's a cool, I mean, I don't know how cool it is, but I find it to be a super helpful trick for figuring out how to arrange layers of clothing. So it's difficult to see where the shoulders and where the arm and the waistline of this model are when you have this shirt visible on top of it, right? One thing that you can adjust temporarily, it's not permanent, so you don't have to worry about ruining anything, is you can adjust the opacity of these individual layers. So this striped blouse, I can make it more see-through. So I can go to opacity here on the right. in my layer panel, and I can turn that opacity down to, let's say, 50%. And then I can now much more easily know when I have this to a closer size. What I'm going to try to do is match her shoulder line, which I actually think that's pretty good. So I've matched, here's the shoulder of this blouse, here's the shoulder of this blouse, and then you can see her shoulders underneath. Now the collar is still a little bit weird, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. We can fix that in a second. And this is still pretty loose here, but again, I'm not going to worry about that right now. So I've matched the shoulder line. And let me turn the opacity up so you can see what that looks like. So you can see that it looks like, okay, maybe it looks like it's hanging off of her shoulders correctly. You could almost believe that this person from the shoulders down, you could maybe believe that this person is wearing this shirt. But obviously up at the top, it's like, what's going on here? This doesn't make any sense. So we are going to play around with some of the other functions in Photoshop. So I'm going to select this striped blouse layer again. I'm going to turn the opacity down to, let's say 50 or 55, something somewhere around there. You can play with that, whatever works for you. And I think we will do, let's see, I'm going to use Command T. Yes. So while I'm in this move tool and on my blouse layer, I'm going to hit Command T. So edit, transform, and then we're going to use warp. Okay. Edit, transform, and we're going to use warp. So you'll see when the warp tool is on, you have these little dots here. And the great thing about this is you can either pull these dots down, or you don't have to use the dots. You can actually just kind of drag inside of your image, and it will, depending on where you're clicking, it will drag and adjust the dots for you. And the awesome thing is that, so I can get this area situated. So I know that I want this collar to be maybe a little bit like at the middle of her neck. And I need to widen that maybe a little bit so it looks a little more natural. And now this is too low, right? So what do? Well, I'm going to click out here and I'm going to bring that up. And now this is a little too high. So it's just a matter of like using this warp tool and adjusting little section by section until you feel, now I'm going to bring this in actually so it fits a little better. And again, because the opacity is down, you can see her actual figure underneath. So that looks pretty good in terms of the neck. Let me click OK up here, commit, transform, and then I'm going to turn the opacity up so you can see that's looking a lot better. Let's go and work with the waistline here. I'm not going to get too serious about the waist because we have to put the skirt on top, and I don't know how small the skirt is going to be, so we'll deal with that more later. So with the striped blouse selected, I'm going to go image, oh no, edit, transform, and warp, right? So let's turn the opacity down again so I can see where her waistline is, which is about right here, because I want her skirt to be at kind of her natural waistline. So that is where I want the narrowest part of this blouse to be. So you can see as I bring this in, right, this sleeve is also brought in, which I don't want that to happen totally, but I can take care of that because I can pull this out again up here. I can pull this guy out up here. And we're seeing a little bit of her hip here, but I'm not going to worry a ton about it because, like I said, we're still putting the skirt on top of this. So I actually don't think we will have to be super concerned about seeing her hip line here. Let's turn up the opacity and see what that looks like. I think that's looking pretty okay. I would call that passable. That looks pretty okay. So let's commit this. I'm going to click the check and I'm going to turn the opacity up. And I think that is the beginning of this blouse. I would say that looks pretty good. There's a little bit of an issue here with the blouse running into her neck. One of the simplest things that you can do, you might want to wait until later in the process, but you can also do this now, is I've just turned this opacity down. You can see where it intersects with her neckline in a couple places. And I'm just going to use my eraser tool. I'm going to make sure that I am on this normal like hard round eraser, which you guys have. You'll have just a circle like this. And then you can just like follow the neckline like that. Now let's turn this opacity up again. And now you can see it's like, oh, that looks like a regular shirt. Great. All right, so let's move on to the skirt. I'm gonna leave this bottom section here and let's move on to the skirt. So I'm gonna turn the skirt on. Now remember the thing about the layers, right? Is that they're just like a real collage in real life. So if you see the figure here is on the bottom, and then on top of that is the striped blouse, and then up here is the skirt. If these are out of order, right, you're gonna see things in the wrong order. So make sure that you're paying attention to what order you have these objects in so that you can see them in the right way. So I want to select this skirt, right? I want to get rid of everything else. So I'm going to use our favorite object selection tool. So I'm going to go here, object selection tool, make sure that I'm on new selection. And again, I'm just going to trace around this skirt, get close and see how we do. I'm going to zoom in. Pretty good. There's this weird extra bag here, but it's okay. I think this is pretty good. So let's go through and get rid of some of this extra stuff that we don't need. So to get rid of stuff, right, we're going to go here and use our lasso tool. Instead of adding to the selection, we want to subtract from the selection. So it's going to be this third tool up here. So make sure I'm on subtract from a selection, and I'm just going to circle anything I want to get rid of. So the same thing with this dark line here and part of the bag. We can get rid of that. We can see kind of part of her hand here. We're gonna get rid of that. A little bit of her arm here. Again, you definitely can spend a lot of time doing this, but I think if you are choosing to do this for your final project, I don't think that that's super necessary. It's more about the feeling, right? So I don't need you to stress about having it be exact. Great. I think we've gotten everything like hideous that we want out of here. So then what I'm going to do is right click inside of here. And again, I'm going to select the inverse. So that's the outside area. And then I'm going to delete that. So now I have this weird shaped skirt. I'm going to deselect everything. So Command D or select, deselect, right? And then I'm gonna change the size of this. So I'm gonna hold my shift key down and I am going to get this kind of in position here. Um, let's do a couple things because, right, I can't see where her waist is. I can't see, yeah, it's kind of difficult to see what's going on. So let's click on the blouse here and let's turn the opacity down to maybe like 25. And you can still see the blouse here, right? But you can also, more importantly, see the body underneath. So then what I want to do, also maybe I want to turn the opacity on this skirt down. Yeah, I think I do. So you can see that by layering opacities, you can still get a lot of information, right? Because I can still see her full figure underneath here, and I can still see all of the layers on top of that. So I want to line this waistband up with like her natural waistline where I want that to be. And this is where instead of growing this to match her waistline, right? Because as you'll see, as I keep, if I hold shift down and I expand this to match her waistline, the entire thing, right? Because it's doing it proportionally, the entire skirt is growing in every direction. And this skirt is already oversized because of it's a long skirt because of the proportion of the original picture. And I don't want it to be a long skirt on her. I actually want it to be shorter, and I think it looks kind of funky and too big right now. So I think what I want to do is get it to like a size that feels right, like make sure that the pleats feel right, which I think on her figure maybe feels like that. Let me zoom out. That feels better to me. Um, okay, so I feel like the pleats are now the right size-ish. I'm gonna line up this waistband with her waist. And then instead of holding the shift key, right, and finding these arrows, I want it to grow just horizontally. So I'm going to use this little bar here. And if I click on that, this is going to grow just horizontally, right? So that's kind of a little trick there that you don't always have to grow everything proportionately. Um, you know, yeah. So let's see. I want to zoom in. I think I'm actually just going to turn this blouse off for a second. I'm going to peek this in just a little bit more. Great. Now, like, how long do I want it? I feel like it's a little long right now, this skirt. So let's play around with that. Again, instead of holding shift when I move these little white bars, I am just going to drag from the bottom up. And you can see like this could be a weird tiny mini skirt, but we don't want that. I think I want it like somewhere in this kind of sweet spot of like right under her knees, but not quite to her cap. That looks very cute and proportional to me. So that looks pretty good. Now let's turn this blouse up all the way and see what we've got going on here. So now that you have these layered, you can see on one side, okay, this kind of fits in here. It's working. It looks like it's tucked in. This side is hanging out. That looks stupid, right? So let's Command T. We're going to transform. No. Ugh. Let's see. Edit, transform, warp, and our little dots are going to come up. And we're just going to like pull that in here until it looks like it's tucked into this shirt, into this skirt. You'll see it does start to look a little screwed up, y'all, when you're doing all of this transform stuff. Like you can see on this pattern, it starts to get a little warped, but I think that's kind of just the nature. To me, that's kind of like the nature and like charm of this type of collage. Like obviously there are definitely ways that we could spend a lot more time making these things look like real clothes, but layering them like this is simple and it communicates effectively, and there are going to be very few questions obviously about what these clothes are. I think I want this like slightly lower. It just looks like kind of high on her. Cool. Okay, so the other thing I want to change about this skirt though, I'm just gonna click on the skirt, make sure the skirt is selected, and I'm gonna warp again. I want to bring up, I want like a little bit, I just want this to be, yeah, like just a little bit kind of A-line shape. So all I've done is I've left everything the same at the top, and I've just grown things at the bottom. So it's a little bit more A-line. Cool. All right, so there we've already got our skirt and our blouse. Let's talk about Vivian Nunez. Let's talk about getting the ideal face, like my ideal casting, onto this figure. So let's move Vivian Nunez all the way up to the top because the face is going to be all the way on the top. So this is such a great figure, such a great photo of her. But I'm going to go through a few things because what I love about this photo is I love her hair, I love her personality, but she's very smiley in this photo. And I think she's like a little too smiley for this character in this moment. The issue is that I had trouble finding a photo that was large enough that I thought could work in a collage where she wasn't, that was also the right shape and the right size and everything where she wasn't smiling. So this was my best pull from the internet. But I'm going to show you how we can fix that a little bit. So let's just see what happens when we use our object selection tool. So I'm going to click on object selection tool, make sure I'm on Vivian Nunez, and then let's just try, I only want to get like her face and her hair. So let's see what happens when I do just that. Not bad. We've got some extra stuff here, but I feel like that's not bad, honestly. So I'm going to zoom in and I'm just going to get rid of some of this stuff by hand. So I'm going to go here to my lasso tool. I'm going to make sure I'm on subtract again. And I'm going to get rid of like this little background bit. And then I'm going to get rid of everything below her face. I don't know if you can hear my husband watching The Daily Show in the other room. So either apologies or you're welcome. I don't know if you like The Daily Show. Mm. So I'm just, and with hair, this is tough. Again, you can spend a ton of time, a ton of time. And actually, there are some really great artificial intelligence features on Adobe Photoshop that allow you to get very crisp and clean, like spidery hair like this on the outside. But I just don't think that's super important right now. I'm actually going to get rid of this because I feel like I don't want to see the chain there. And then I want to add, let's see, oh, I need to get rid of that. You can see I'm just kind of like adding in a little bit of like hair shape when I'm drawing. Um, Now I want to add in a little bit of the end of this hair here. So I'm going to go up here, select add, and I'm going to like do again, hair shape, hair shape, hair shape, like that, and then complete my circle. And then there you go. You could, again, spend more time doing this, but I feel like for our purposes, this is a pretty good Vivian face. So now I'm going to right click, select inverse, delete everything else. So there is my hilarious Vivian head. Deselect that. And now let's see what that looks like when we kind of get that on here. Kind of hilarious. And it's just, she's like so smiley. It's just a little too, it just looks like she's cheesing y'all. So let's get rid of a little bit of that cheese, okay? So we're gonna do kind of a cool thing, I think. So I'm gonna make sure that I'm on her face here, and I'm gonna go to filter, and then I'm gonna go to liquify. And when you go to that, it's gonna open up this whole other area here. And when you're on her face in liquify, it's going to do this automatic it's going to do like an automatic face selection usually, like it knows that you're going to adjust a face. So all of these tools are going to pop up here on the right, and you can have a good time playing with these if you're doing weird, like if you're trying to change people's faces. I'll just really quickly show you. If there are multiple people, you'll see that like it'll also select like face one, face two, face three, but there's only one face in this image. So um, for example, you can change eye size, and this is where the artificial intelligence of Photoshop will do this for you. You want to make sure that, or at least I do usually, I tend to make sure that this little button is selected if I'm going to change any of these things, because what this does is it links the left and the right. Otherwise, you can change them independently, which is kind of hilarious. You can make one eye gigantic or one eye like really small, but generally, I don't think you want to do that. So I try to make them the same. So I link if I'm going to change any of these. So I think one thing that will help is to like, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit, is to make her eyes like a little bit smaller because they just are kind of, I think they're really big because she's like smiling and wide-eyed and like, yeah, I'm really excited. So I'm gonna make them a little bit smaller. Um, okay, let's see. Eye height will do different things like, yeah, it's the actual like vertical height at the widest part of the eye. I'm not going to change any of that, so I'm just going to leave that at 0. Eye width, I'm not going to change any of these things, but you can play around with them. They're really interesting. Maybe eye tilt, because like when we smile, the outside edges of our eyes tend to change. But see, like that looks so funny. Um, but maybe like zeroing out a little bit could be helpful. Yeah, let's see if I kind of balance those out. Great. You can also play with the nose. Smile here. These are the things that are just like simple and really helpful. So like I'm gonna go to smile and I want to like decrease her smile because I just want her to be smiling less. And then you can play with like, this is the actual size of the upper lip. I'm not gonna mess with that, I don't think, because I think it looks great. Mouth width. I think that could probably be smaller, yes, because that's not too small because then it looks like she's eating a lemon, but I think smaller is going to help her look a little bit more cash. Maybe this is, yes, already a little bit more natural. So then the other thing that you can do, once you've just messed with these kind of artificial intelligence AI things over here, you'll see that when I'm over here on the left-hand panel, there's this forward warp tool, right? And that is what is you can control the forward warp tool with these numbers up here, like the size of this thing. So you want it to be like small-ish compared to your figure. Like you'll see what I'm saying. And really what you can do is just like literally like you can drag everything. So we don't want to do that because that looks like a nightmare. But we can take some little things and oh god, how do I go backwards? Edit, redo. There we go. And like I think I want to like decrease this a little bit. Let me zoom out so we can see it in kind of context. And this is actually, I think I want this tool to be slightly bigger because bigger in some ways is better. And then I want to like get rid of a little bit of the apples of her cheeks. So I'm gonna squeeze this guy a little bit. Again, y'all, you don't have to do this. I just thought it was like a cool, fun thing to show you. Also, maybe I'm gonna like open this up a little bit more, which I think just is more neutral. Yeah, I like that. Great. Okay, so I'm gonna click OK, and there's our new Vivian. I think she's looking more normal. The other thing I want to do is like you can check the head size against the figure, but don't get too screwed up with that because people have different shaped heads, you guys. So like don't get weirded out if like why are her eyes so different or whatever. Just look at the whole thing, look at it holistically if you're trying to do this. Um, but I think it's like just useful to sometimes reference the model's head, but a lot of times I think it's helpful to just look at your whole figure and be like, ask yourself, does that look crazy? Does this person look abnormal? And if they do, then maybe try to fix that. So I think that is looking pretty good. I think I want to like tilt her head a little bit. So instead of clicking on one of these guys, turning into a double arrow, if I hover over the top, you see it turns into this little arc. And I'm going to click that. And yeah, I think like by having her do a little, I feel like that just looks so much more natural now with a little head tilt. So there's my, now actually, let's see, I could do this for hours. Now, there's my Nyuta. Great. Okay, so the other thing I want to do, the last thing I need to do now is put some shoes on her. So that is probably going to be the, I don't know, not the trickiest part, but it just has more steps. So let's turn on our shoe layer. I'm going to turn off this face layer just so it's out of the way, but I want to leave it on top because the head, we want to be on top the entire time. Okay. So now that we're here in this shoe layer, the only thing we need from this image are these shoes. So, I'm going to come down here, and the first thing that I'm going to do is select this. So the first thing I'm going to do is come down here and select these shoes and get rid of everything else. So I'm just going to make sure I'm in this layer, and I'm going to use just this regular rectangular selection tool. Boop, like that. And then I'm going to select the inverse and get rid of everything. Cool. Um, great. So what I want to do is I want to isolate these shoes because here's the thing. If you try to get them in the right spot, right now, like her feet look tiny. They're just out of proportion, which again, like if you if that's cool with you, then that could be cool, but that's not my thing. That's not my style of rendering, so I'm just not going to do that. So you're going to see me kind of dealing with that. So what I want to do is isolate each of these so that I can adjust them on her body. So I'm going to turn this basically into uh, two images. So I'm going to go to Object Selection Tool. I'm in my shoe layer, and let's start with this one. And I'm just going to try to select this shoe. And let's see, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see. This is pretty good. Yeah, I'm going to leave actually a little bit of her leg because a little bit of the model's leg because I'm just going to try to blend it in with the figure model's leg. Maybe that'll make sense when I do it. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm leaving this kind of like roundish shape of leg. I can, again, you can spend more time definitely doing this. I can get rid of like a little something here that feels extra, but I think that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is right click on that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a new layer via cut, right? Or I guess if I'm hearing my teacher say this, we would make a new layer via copy. So let's do that. Now what that does is you can see I have still the whole image here, but if I turn this shoe layer off, bloop, I now have a new shoe layer, right? Cool. So before I forget, why don't we label this new shoe layer? We will layer it. This is her right shoe. Great. So now I'm going to go back to my shoe layer, and I want to do the same thing here. Um, Object selection tool, try to select this shoe. This one did an okay job, missed kind of a lot, but we have the technology, so I'm going to go in and just try to select a little more of this. Again, if you, yes, you already know the spiel. You can do this. You can spend a lot of time doing this. I have spent a lot of time doing this very, very nicely for my graduate level classes. I'm not asking you to do that. So then I want to keep, again, some of this leg, but just because I'm a weirdo, I'm going to kind of like round this off because I think it'll make it easier to blend it later. Great. So that's my other shoe. So I'm going to go layer via copy, right click, layer via copy, and here's my other shoe layer. So before I forget, I'm going to label that left shoe. And then these guys now are the original shoes. And why don't I just drag them into my originals folder. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them invisible, and then I'm going to drag them into my originals folder. So now I have these shoes here on top of my model. I can click on the right shoe. I can change the opacity so I can see it a little bit better. And now let's click shift and just drag this and see if we can get this to look kind of normal on her. I think I need this to be less see-through. Yeah, so you can see I keep just kind of going back and forth. The other thing I might do is just like actually turn this off and turn it back on and turn it off and turn it back on. And also, again, always looking at this holistically. So like taking like the equivalent of taking a step back. That actually looks very normal to me. So the only thing I might change is you can see how the angle of this is weird. Like the original leg might have gone up this direction. So maybe I will just angle this a little bit. So again, I'm going to hover until I get these, this little arc here. And let's maybe try to match that. And then shift this over because I feel like that will probably make this a more realistic looking shoe. So I'll turn the opacity all the way up, and then boom, there's our shoe, our first shoe. Now she has one regular shoe and one teeny tiny shoe. That's really late. I'm getting pretty silly. Sorry about that. Okay, so then here is our other shoe. And let's turn the opacity down so I can see her foot through there. I'm going to hold shift and I'm just going to grow this. And this one is at this kind of different angle, you know, so who knows when this is going to look right. And also it's you're just going to have to, some of this is going to be a little bit, I'm going to shift this around. I'm trying to cover the original model's foot, but also like make it so that it looks normal. It's super normal that one of these might be, especially because you can see one of them is facing straight out, the other one is facing kind of to her left. So it would be normal that one of them might be slightly lower because if you think about perspective, one of them could be actually in front of the other, right? So that doesn't look too weird to me. Maybe it's a little bit, I think that looks good. It looks a little small compared to the other one, so maybe it needs to be bigger still. Let's see. It's just a bit of trial and error. I think that's pretty good. Okay, there are the shoes. So then why did I leave this flesh here, right? The original skin. So I'm gonna go to my eraser tool and I'm gonna erase this, but I'm not gonna, right now I'm on the like hard round eraser. If I do that, like not really much use, especially here, because if I'm in the left shoe, because you can just see her actual, you know, weird original leg under there, and that doesn't look good. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go to soft round, which you should all have in your general brushes. So I'm going to make sure I'm in soft round eraser, and then I'm going to change the opacity of the eraser. And so you can play around with this. What that does is just like changing the opacity of the layer, instead of erasing everything, it erases just a portion of the layer. And so now through clicking multiple times, that can just blend into the um, original models leg. Oh, so now to do the left shoe, I need to make sure that I've selected left shoe, and I am going to just do the same thing. Remember, I can't go too far this way or I will get to that kind of like disappeared white section, but I can get more of this gone. And then if I zoom out, dogs, actually it's kind of weird, especially, oh God, what did I do? Let's go back before I ruined it. Yeah, that's okay. We might add some color in there to even that out even more, but I think it's a better look than it was before. Cool. So now we have our first look done. Let's turn our Vivian head back on, and then boom, there is your first look. Let's say you want to add a title block. You can go here to the text tool. Before I do title block, I'll just say, let's say you want to do a line, right? Like a horizon line, which is a very simple thing that I like to add to my renderings to kind of ground them. You absolutely do not have to do this, but it's a thing I like to do. So I'm going to click on line. I want to make sure that here I've selected in fill. Let's see. I want to shape. In fill, I want to make sure I select black, or I can actually go here and select black. Stroke, I want to make sure is also selected as black. This is the actual size of the line. 6 pixels, I think, is pretty good. And then you want to choose where I basically figure out like, oh, I want it to be about here. And I'll drag it across the screen. And you'll see the number, which is like the angle, and you want it to be 0 degrees is going to be level. So you want to make sure you're at 0 degrees. It's okay if it hangs off the edge of your canvas, because once you save it, that will disappear. So there is your horizon line. You can adjust your horizon line by going to the move tool, and you can move it up and down if you wanted it to be a little higher, a little lower. Right now it's sitting actually on top of the shoes, you can see, which looks weird. That's because, again, just like I was telling you, all of these layers work like a regular collage. So if you want it to be below the shoes, you need to make sure you move it below the shoes. So if I take this and I put it below both of the shoes, now, let's see. Oh, I didn't. I moved her head below the shoes. If I move this below the shoes, now the horizon line is below her shoes. Yeah. And if you want to add a label, you can use this horizontal text tool. So you want to click horizontal text tool, and it's going to bring up this little cursor icon, and you will drag it just like you were clicking and dragging a box. And then you will type whatever you want. So this character's name is Nieta. Now let's say you, and then you can click OK. Let's say you want to change the title of this. You want to change this text. It can be very confusing. You don't want to be in the text tool anymore, because if you try to click on this again, like let's say you accidentally click somewhere else, you will continue to make new text boxes. So that's just like a weird, silly thing that you should know. So if you want to change this text again, the easiest and most sure way to do it is in this move with your while the move tool is selected, over here in the layers panel, you want to double click on the big T, double click, and it's going to highlight the text in there. So you can change it to whatever you want. But again, mine is Nieta. Up here, you can do all the things that you can do in, whatever word processing programs, and you can actually download more texts than this through Adobe if you want different ones, and you can adjust different things like that. So that's that. Now there's your one look dern. Let's go to the next look, which is the jacket on top of that. So I am going to, here's what I'm going to do before I do that. I am going to do a little book housekeeping, right? I try to keep my layers organized because this can get very confusing very quickly. So Nieta and this line, these things are both kind of like label things. So I'm going to select both of them and I'm going to drag them to this folder here, which is going to make them into a group, and I'm going to call them label. That way I can quickly turn them on and off, and I know where they are, and it's very easy to spot them. Everything else, not everything else. Let's see. I'm going to select. I'm trying to think of what things are going to change. I think the things that will change when we put the jacket on top are going to be the blouse and the skirt. So I'm going to put these things, the blouse and the skirt, I'm going to drag them to group, and I'm going to call them blouse and skirt 1. Great. And now I'm going to drag that group. Also, I should say, the only reason I'm doing this, so you don't have to do all of this, the only reason I'm doing this is because I have multiple looks. If you were just doing the one look, you wouldn't have to make all of these copies and stuff like that, but this way you can see the process. So because I'm going to put this jacket on top of this blouse, I want to make a copy of all of these things, this skirt and this blouse. So I'm going to go down here to copy. So now I have the original blouse and skirt 1, and then I have this one, which I will now call blouse and skirt with jacket. Cool. So then let's put the jacket up here, and let's turn that layer on. I'm going to turn these shoes off, and I'm going to turn this head off so I can't see it. Great. So we love this jacket. We don't need anything else. So let's try our object selection tool. So with our jacket layer selected, I'm going to go through and try to just get the jacket. Let's see what happens. Meh. Kind of selected everything. So let's try that again. Let's see. In the object selection tool, you can actually use, like, you can go here and subtract from selection. So maybe let's try that. Like if we isolate just these jeans, what happens? I mean, that got rid of some of this stuff. So let's try to do that. So now we're using subtract from selection, and we're letting Adobe's like artificial intelligence get rid of some of this stuff, and it's using like matching colors. So now we see it's like getting to a problem where it's like, I don't know what you want. Oh my God, y'all, I'm so silly, obviously, when I'm this tired. That's much closer. I also don't want this hand or any of this figure. Yeah, cool. Okay. So now that it's gotten rid of like a lot more of this stuff, I feel good about going in with the lasso tool. And now it's like, I know I want to get rid of the entirety of this hand here. So let's do that. And now that's gone. I think I'll actually just go in and do this. Not entirely necessary, but I'm going to do it. And now I want to get rid of this shirt. And jeans on the inside. anything else weird? That was a little bit there. That's so good. And then I want to add some of this stuff up here in the shoulder area that it has deleted. Just a few little things. Okay, so I'm going to go to add, and I want to make sure that I add that shoulder line, like where the jacket would continue, and then do my best to do the same thing here. Like this might not be exact, but I want to add that back. And some of her hair is in there, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. So now that I have the jacket selected, I am going to right click, select inverse, and delete. And now I can use my move tool to move this. And you will see, probably, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit to get it kind of situated similarly. You'll see right away that it's like, huh, this elbow is like in the wrong direction. So what am I going to do about that? Well, we'll leave it there, and then we'll go to edit, and then transform, and then flip vertical. Nope. Edit, transform, and then flip horizontal. Boom. And so then it's just taken your image and it's totally flipped it perfectly horizontally. So now you can see that this kind of almost lines up with our model underneath, which is awesome. So let's zoom in a little bit so we can start adjusting this on the body. So I'm going to turn the opacity down a little bit. And let's bring up our, I actually think one thing I'm going to do that I didn't do in my other sample is like, you can see that this almost feels like we should do this in two parts. Like there's this side of the jacket and then there's this side of the jacket, as opposed to the blouse where you could see it all at once. So I think what I'm going to do is just turn this, like I did with the shoes, just turn this into two parts. So I am going to use my object, my lasso tool, and I'm going to select around this side of the jacket, and I'm going to layer via cut. I'm not going to copy it, I'm just going to do layer via cut. So now you can see there's the left side of jacket and the right side of jacket. And these can now be moved like totally independently, which is kind of awesome. So great. Now what I'm going to do is just like before, so you can select both of these at the same time, right? Which is cool. Or you can select them individually. I'm going to select both of them at the same time just to change the opacity, but you can do that individually. You don't have to do it at the same time. And then let's start playing with this. This is actually, it lines up really well with the arm of the model. There are just a few little spots here where you can see her arm here and the blouse, but I actually don't want to worry about the blouse quite yet. I'm actually going to go down here and turn this blouse off for a second. So let's get this fitted on this figure. So with this side selected, I'm going to press Command T for transform, and then we're going to use our warp tool. And I just want to drag this side out a little bit. I want this to be touching her neck, but I want this to be sitting a little bit off her shoulder like a jacket, right? And that way you can see now it covers her entire arm. Down here, we want it to like hug her arm a little bit better at the sleeve. And I want to change this angle a little bit, but I'll show you a different way to do that. I actually feel like this is now hanging off of her shoulder in a really great way. So let's do the same thing here. Let's like, I wonder if we want to like tilt this a little bit actually. And then, yeah, this, and then we'll play with the angle of these things separately. So now I'm going to turn the opacity up. Bloop. Okay, we're getting there. I'm going to work on these one side at a time. So I'm going to turn this, pardon her boop. I'm going to turn that side of the jacket off. And now I'm going to focus on this side. I want this, the hem of the jacket to kind of like pivot out because it should kind of fit at her waist a little bit. And then it would like, you can't see my hand, but it would like hang this direction more. So the easiest way, or I think like one of the most effective ways to do that is to use puppet warp, which is the last tool I think that we're going to cover in this video. So I'm going to make sure that I'm on the jacket layer. I'm going to go to edit and I'm going to go to puppet warp. So actually, let me make sure I have to change a setting because I want it to look just like yours will. Okay, I will BRB because I want to make sure my settings are the same as yours. Okay, I'm back. I went through so much Googling and then I remembered that it's like not a thing, that it's a setting. It's a very simple thing. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to puppet warp this. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go, no, I'm going to go to Edit and Puppet Warp. And then right up here at the top, I have this deselected, but on yours it's probably selected. There is a button that says either Show Mesh or Not Show Mesh. And when Mesh is selected, you will see this weird grid. I eventually got tired of seeing that. Oh, and you can actually see now that I missed a part of the of the jacket or the shirt or something because it still lives there. I got tired of seeing this, and you don't have to see it once you understand how puppet warp works. And it actually started to get in my way, so I turned it off. Puppet warp works basically by if you imagine using pins, like push pins, and then like stretching things around push pins. So let me just show you. So things that I don't want to move in this image are like, I like where this shoulder is, so I'm gonna put a push pin there, I like where this is, so I'm gonna put a push pin there. I like this, and I'm just gonna start putting push pins in where I want things to be. You'll see I start to move this because I could see her arm. And as I move my push pins, you'll see that things start to get funky. Push pin. Okay, so where I want this to start pivoting is actually down here. So let's see what happens if I just take, and I'm putting a push pin and I'm holding, and then I'm selecting it, and you can see, I mean, that's kind of great. Okay, so here's what I'll do. I'm going to put a push pin here, and then I'm going to select it, and you can see when you mouse over it, it turns into a little arrow, and I'm just going to drag it. And you can see that now you can manipulate. I mean, you could do all kinds of crazy things, but all I want to do is kind of swing this jacket out this direction. And now maybe I don't like how round this is, so guess what I can do? I can put another pin here and kind of straighten that out a little bit. And I can straighten this out a little bit. And maybe I want to try to like simulate this nipping in a tiny bit at her waist. And you can see it's literally like pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling with push pins. Once you like what you see, you can click yes. And there's my kind of jacket that is draped more closely around her figure. So how can I do the same thing on this side? Well, this side's a little more complicated. Again, if you were doing this for real, I think you know, this one's just a little bit more complicated. So you'll get an idea of how you might accomplish something like this. The way I'm going to do this is, I think if I was trying to puppet warp this whole thing, let me just show you. File, edit, puppet warp. If I was trying to puppet warp this whole jacket here into place, it would just start to look very weird very quickly because I need to now move this entire thing over here. And you can see it starts to look like a strange kind of like weird centipede thing. And then like you see it's like overlapping bizarrely. And then what do? It starts to get super weird, right? So I think that's not the ideal way to do it. I think the ideal way is again to break this down into more manageable pieces. So what I'm going to do is instead of, I treated this as two pieces, right? There was this side of the jacket and this side of the jacket. Now what I'm going to do is actually treat this as its own piece, the sleeve as its own piece. So I'm going to go and I'm going to select just this sleeve here, and I'm gonna right click and layer via cut. So now I have just this own weird sleeve out here by itself. So now I can deal with just this side of the jacket and getting this guy to kind of fit the body and the figure, and then I can worry about this arm. So I do think I will puppet warp this a little bit. So let's make sure I'm in this jacket layer, edit, puppet warp, and let's start putting some pins in this thing. I'm gonna do a pin up here. The thing that I want to keep straight is really this neckline here. So I'm going to put a bunch of pins there. And then just like I did on this side, I do think I want this to kind of pivot out a little bit. And then I want this edge to stay pretty straight. Now, this is now sticking out way over her arm. I'm going to make this more big. You can see how much of her arm and how much is hanging off her body. So I think what I'm going to do is like try to shrink that in. And you can see this is why it's like so much better maybe to try to make these pieces more manageable, and maybe this thing just looks like a little fold here and I can actually deal with that in another way. So let's see, what does that look like? That looks kind of funky, but I think we can deal with this a little bit later. Yeah. Okay, so let's try and put this sleeve back on. I'm gonna just pivot this and put this guy into place here. I'm going to turn this blouse off so I can see where my figure's arm actually is. Great. And now I'm going to do a little puppet warp on this sleeve. So edit, puppet warp, and I'm going to put a pin here, and then I'll put a pin in the underarm, and then I want to swing this whole thing to kind of better match where my model's arm is. Cool. Okay. So how might I fix some of this weird stuff here on the left side of the jacket? So one of the easiest things that you can do is probably use the smudge tool here, which is going to smear and blend some of these things together. So that is this tool here. And we talked about the smudge tool in our previous lesson on Photoshop, so you might have a favorite smudge or blender thing that you want to use, and you can just like smudge these areas together. And then from a distance, you'll see that is basically disappeared. The other thing that you could do to make, you see there's still like a bunch of space here that is kind of unnecessary. I mean, maybe you want to just erase some of that. I would make sure that I was back on a hard round eraser. This would be at 100%. And I'm on the left side of the jacket. And maybe we just like, what happens if we do that? I mean, that already looks so much better. Right? Let's turn this blouse back on. I also am forgetting that her head is here and is going to be covering a lot of that. So the reason we made a separate copy of this blouse, this is the last thing we'll deal with, is because you can see it sticking out from behind this jacket, and we don't want that, right? So if you did this on the original one that we worked on, you would be ruining it. But on this one, which is specifically for blouse and skirt with jacket, if you click on that layer, you can just go in anywhere that you see the blouse that you don't want it, you can just delete it, and you know that even if this jacket is removed and you see how weird this blouse now looks, it doesn't really matter because you have the original that's saved as another layer. I think I'm gonna go in with my tiny eraser and like fix a little bit. It's not a tiny eraser, but that just makes me feel a little better. Yeah. So there she is. Now let's turn the shoes on. And again, looking at things holistically, now maybe like, does this side of the jacket look like it needs to be a little bit lower? Yes, I think that looks better. And if that's the case, then I want to erase this part of the blouse that I can see. So I'm going to make sure that I'm in blouse. You can see a little bit of her shirt, so let's see. A bit of her body. So actually, I guess what I want to do is yes, that's better. So I like being able to see her neck there. And there you go. There is her, and all these jacket parts and pieces I can put in a group so that those stay together. I can label these jacket. I could label these shoes and put them in a group. Oop. And this way you can also like toggle all of these things back and forth, right? So now you know that if you want to see her in the original look, you can turn on blouse and skirt one, turn off jacket, turn off blouse and skirt with jacket, and then you have the original look, right? What's that? Oh, we should move the label to the very bottom so that it's always under the shoes. That's it, y'all. We did it. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have the confidence now to know that you too could do this, and know that, like I said, this is just my style of doing it, which does I lean on the more realistic, which is not to say that you need to do that yourself, right? You don't need to have a figure underneath. You can really do this more like a traditional collage, or like some of the examples I showed you where the head is kind of all, the head can be larger. I think that can, these things can, there's a lot of artistic license here, so I want you to feel free to do that. Reach out if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Okay, thanks.